Right now, as you're watching this, you're doing something that's making your anxiety worse. You don't know you're doing it. Nobody ever taught you that you're doing it. But every single time anxiety shows up, you automatically engage in this one behavior that feeds it, strengthens it, and guarantees it will come back stronger next time. And here's what's strange. Monks who sit in silence for decades have discovered that the moment you stop this behavior, anxiety loses almost all of its power. Not because they're special, not because they've mastered some complex technique, but because they've seen something about the nature of anxiety that changes everything. There's a reason why monks who spend decades in silence seem to possess an unshakable peace that no amount of therapy, medication, or positive thinking seems to replicate in the modern world. They've stumbled upon something that sounds almost too simple to be true, yet it's so profound that once you see it, you can't unsee it. And I'm not talking about meditation techniques, breathing exercises, or any practice you need to perfect. This is about a fundamental shift in perception, a silent realization that happens in an instant but changes everything that comes after. Stay with me, because what I'm about to share isn't something you do. It's something you suddenly recognize, and that recognition alone is what dissolves anxiety at its root. Let me start with a question that might seem strange at first. When you feel anxious right now, where exactly is that anxiety? I don't mean what you're anxious about. The job interview, the relationship, the money problems. I mean, where is the actual sensation of anxiety located? Most people will say it's in their chest, their stomach, their head, somewhere in their body. And yes, there are physical sensations, but here's what monks discover in their silence. The anxiety you think you're experiencing isn't actually the problem. The problem is what you're doing with that anxiety. And this is where everything shifts. You see, when anxiety arises, the immediate instinct is to do something about it, to fix it, to understand it, to make it go away, to distract yourself from it, to analyze why it's there. And in that very attempt, in that resistance, in that need to make the feeling different than it is, you're actually creating a second layer of suffering that's far worse than the original sensation. The monks call this the difference between pain and suffering, between a feeling and your relationship with that feeling. The anxiety itself is just energy moving through your nervous system, a biological response that arises and passes. But your resistance to it, your story about it, your desperate need for it to be different, that's where the real torture begins. Think about it like this. Imagine you're holding a hot coal in your hand. The heat is painful, yes, but what makes it unbearable is your constant gripping and re-gripping of it, your panic about the burn, your mental spiral about how long it's going to hurt and what damage it's doing. If you could simply open your hand and let the coal drop, the pain would still be there for a moment, but it would begin to dissipate immediately. Anxiety works the same way. The sensation arises. Maybe your heart beats faster. Maybe there's a tightness in your chest. Maybe thoughts start racing. That's the coal. But then you grab onto it. You think, oh no, not this again. Why am I feeling this? I shouldn't be anxious right now. What's wrong with me? I need to calm down. I need this to stop. And with each of these thoughts, you're squeezing that coal tighter and tighter, intensifying the very thing you're trying to escape. The silent realization monks come to, often after years of simply sitting with themselves, is this: you don't need to make anxiety go away. You need to stop the war with it. You need to stop adding yourself to the equation. Now I know what you're thinking. This sounds like some kind of spiritual bypassing, like I'm telling you to just accept your anxiety and do nothing about it. But that's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm pointing to is far more radical and far more practical. I'm saying that the very act of trying to stop anxiety is what keeps it alive. It's like being in quicksand. The more you struggle, the deeper you sink. The more you fight anxiety, the more you're confirming to your nervous system that there's something to be anxious about. You're validating the threat. Your brain says, look how hard they're fighting this feeling. It must be really dangerous. Let's amp up the anxiety response to help them. It's a feedback loop, and you're the one creating it, innocently, unknowingly, but creating it nonetheless. Here's where it gets really interesting. Monks spend enormous amounts of time in silence, not doing anything, just sitting, just being. And in that silence, without the constant distraction of doing, achieving, fixing, and improving, something becomes obvious. They start to notice the space between thoughts. They start to notice that feelings come and go like weather patterns. They start to notice that there's an awareness, a consciousness, that's completely untouched by whatever is arising. Anxiety can be there, fear can be there, sadness can be there, but there's a part of you that's simply witnessing it all, like the sky witnessing clouds passing through. The sky doesn't fight the clouds. It doesn't need the storm to end to be at peace. It simply allows everything to move through it. And this is the silent realization. You are not your anxiety. You are the space in which anxiety appears and disappears. This isn't a metaphor or a comforting idea. This is direct experience, but you have to stop long enough to notice it. In our modern world, we never stop. From the moment we wake up to the moment we go to sleep, we're consuming, doing, thinking, planning, remembering, worrying. We're so identified with the content of our experience that we forget the context. We forget that there's an aware presence that's been here all along, unchanging, unshaken, completely at peace regardless of what's happening in the foreground. Anxiety is in the foreground. You are the background. But we've got it backwards. We think we are the anxiety. We think we are the thoughts. We think we are the feelings. And so we suffer with them as them. Let me give you a practical example of what this looks like in real life. Let's say you're about to give a presentation and you feel anxiety rising. Your heart starts pounding. Your palms get sweaty. Thoughts flood your mind about all the ways you might mess up or embarrass yourself. The conventional approach is to try to calm yourself down. Deep breaths, positive affirmations, maybe imagine the audience in their underwear, whatever your strategy is. And sometimes these things help a little, but they're all still operating from the same fundamental assumption that the anxiety is a problem that needs to be solved, that you need to be in a different state than the one you're in. The monk's approach is completely different. The monk notices, okay, there's anxiety. There's a rapid heartbeat, there's sweating, there are thoughts about failure. And then, instead of doing anything about it, instead of resisting it or trying to change it, there's simply a recognition. This is what's happening right now. This is the experience that's here. Not I am anxious, but there is anxiety happening. Do you see the difference? One is identified, personal, solid, something you are. The other is observed, impersonal, fluid, something that's occurring, and in that subtle shift of perspective, everything changes. When you stop resisting the anxiety, when you stop needing it to be different, something miraculous happens. The anxiety doesn't necessarily disappear immediately, but it loses its power. It becomes just sensation, just energy, just biological activation. It's no longer this huge threat to your well-being. It's just what's happening, and you're okay with that. And here's the paradox. The moment you're okay with the anxiety being there, the moment you stop fighting it, it often begins to dissipate on its own. Because anxiety feeds on resistance. It feeds on the story that something is wrong. When you remove that fuel, when you stop adding more anxiety about your anxiety, the original response has nothing to sustain it, and it naturally winds down. But even if it doesn't, even if the anxiety stays, you've fundamentally changed your relationship to it. It's no longer running you. You're not at its mercy. You're simply present with what is, and there's a profound freedom in that. This is what monks discover in their silence, not a technique to eliminate anxiety, but a way of being that doesn't require anxiety to be gone in order to be at peace. They realize that peace isn't a state of mind, it's not a feeling you achieve when everything is calm and comfortable. Peace is what you are underneath all the states of mind, underneath all the feelings. It's the unchanging awareness that's always here, always now, always completely whole, regardless of what's arising. And the beautiful thing about this realization is that you don't have to become a monk to access it. You don't have to meditate for hours a day or go on silent retreats or renounce the world. You just have to stop long enough to notice what's already true. You have to turn your attention away from the content of your experience for a moment and notice the context, the awareness, the consciousness that's making any experience possible. Here's a simple way to taste this for yourself right now. Whatever you're feeling in this moment, whether it's calm, anxious, bored, curious, whatever it is, ask yourself, who is aware of this feeling? Who's noticing it? Not conceptually, not as a thought exercise, but as direct experience. Look for the one who's aware. What you'll find is that you can't actually locate yourself as an object. You can find thoughts, feelings, sensations, But you can't find a separate you that's having these experiences. There's just experiencing happening. There's just awareness being aware. And that awareness has never been touched by any anxiety, any fear, any suffering. It's pristine, pure, completely at peace. The anxiety is like a wave on the surface of an ocean. The wave rises and falls, crashes and dissolves, but the ocean remains undisturbed at its depths. You are the ocean, not the wave. But you've been so focused on the waves that you've forgotten the vast, still depths that you are. Now, I want to address something important because I know some of you might be thinking, this sounds great in theory, but what about real problems? What about when there's an actual threat? When the anxiety is warning me about something important? And this is a crucial distinction. What we're talking about here isn't about denying real issues or ignoring legitimate concerns. If there's a bear chasing you, anxiety is appropriate. It's going to help you run. If you have a medical problem, financial crisis, or relationship issue that needs attention, by all means address it. What we're talking about is the 99% of anxiety that isn't about actual present moment danger, but about stories we're telling ourselves about the future or the past. We're talking about the anxiety about being anxious, the worry about worry, the fear of fear. We're talking about the mental and emotional spiral that takes a small concern and turns it into a catastrophe. That's what dissolves when you stop resisting, when you stop adding yourself to the equation. In fact, when you're not caught up in the resistance to anxiety, when you're not consumed by the war with your own feelings, you actually become far more effective at dealing with real problems. Because you're not operating from a place of panic and reactivity, you're operating from a place of clarity and presence. You can see what actually needs to be done and do it, without all the extra suffering layered on top. The monks aren't peaceful because they have no problems. They're peaceful because they're not making their problems worse by resisting what is. They're not arguing with reality. They're not spending energy wishing things were different than they are. They're simply responding to what's in front of them from a place of inner stillness, and that makes all the difference. There's an old Zen story that illustrates this perfectly. A monk asks his teacher, "What did you do before you were enlightened?" The teacher says, "I chopped wood and carried water." The monk asks, "What do you do now that you're enlightened?" The teacher says, "I chop wood and carry water." The monk is confused. So what's the difference? The teacher replies, "Before enlightenment, I chopped wood and carried water while lost in thoughts about chopping wood and carrying water. After enlightenment, I just chop wood and carry water." That's it. That's the whole secret. It's not about changing what you do or what you experience. It's about changing your relationship to it. It's about being fully present with what is, without the constant commentary, without the resistance, without the need for it to be different. And in that presence, anxiety loses its grip. It becomes just another experience passing through, no more significant than a bird flying across the sky. So how do you actually live from this realization? How do you integrate this into your daily life when you're not sitting in a monastery, but dealing with deadlines, relationships, bills, and all the chaos of modern existence? The key is to start noticing when you're in resistance. Start noticing when you're fighting with what is. It usually shows up as tension in the body, as a tightness, a clenching, a holding. It shows up as a mental argument with reality. This shouldn't be happening. I shouldn't feel this way. Why is this happening to me? When you catch yourself in that mode, that's your invitation to stop, to pause, to take a breath, and to simply acknowledge, okay, this is what's happening right now. Not as resignation or defeat, but as a recognition of reality. This is what is. And in that recognition, in that acceptance of what is, you create space. You create room for the experience to be here without it overwhelming you. Another practice that monks use, though it's more of a non-practice, is to simply notice awareness itself. Throughout your day, occasionally remember to notice that you are aware. Notice that, right now, in this moment, you are conscious. There is an awareness of these words, of your body, of your surroundings, of your thoughts and feelings. Just notice that. Don't try to do anything with it. Don't try to change it or improve it. Just notice it. That simple recognition, repeated throughout the day, begins to shift your center of gravity from being identified with the content of experience to resting as the awareness of experience. And from that perspective, anxiety isn't your anxiety. It's just anxiety appearing in awareness. It's not personal. It's not permanent. It's not you. It's just a temporary arising, and like everything else, it will pass. Here's something else the monks understand deeply. Thoughts about anxiety are not the same as anxiety itself. This is huge. So much of what we call anxiety is actually just thinking about anxiety. It's the story, the narrative, the mental movie about what might happen, what it means, why it's there, how to get rid of it. And all of that is just thought, just mental activity. The actual sensation of anxiety, if you strip away all the thinking, is usually quite manageable. It's just some energy in the body, some physiological activation. But we lay a story after story on top of it, until it becomes this massive, overwhelming thing. When you see through the stories, when you recognize them as just thoughts, just mental phenomena arising and passing, they lose their power. You don't have to believe them, you don't have to engage with them. You can just let them be there like clouds in the sky, and they'll move on all by themselves. The silent realization is called silent for a reason. It's not something you figure out intellectually. It's not a concept you understand. It's something you recognize in the stillness. That's why monks value silence so much. Not because there's something magical about not talking, but because in silence, without the constant noise of doing and achieving and fixing, the truth becomes obvious. You are already whole. You are already complete. You are already at peace underneath all the turbulence. Anxiety can be there, stress can be there, fear can be there, and you can still be fundamentally okay because you are not those things. You are what's aware of those things, and that awareness has never been disturbed by anything. I want to share something personal for a moment. Years ago, I struggled with intense anxiety, the kind that would wake me up at 3 in the morning with my heart pounding, the kind that made simple tasks feel overwhelming, the kind that made me feel like I was constantly on the edge of catastrophe. I tried everything: therapy, medication, meditation apps, breathing techniques, exercise, diet changes, you name it. And some of these things helped a little, but nothing really shifted the fundamental pattern. I was always at war with my anxiety, always trying to eliminate it, always seeing it as the enemy. Then one day, during a particularly intense wave of anxiety, I just got exhausted. I was so tired of fighting, and in that exhaustion I just stopped. I stopped trying to make it go away. I stopped trying to understand it. I stopped trying to do anything about it. I just let it be there, and something incredible happened. The anxiety was still there, the sensations were still there, but suddenly there was space around it. It wasn't all-consuming anymore. I could feel it and be okay at the same time. And in that moment I realized I had been making it worse the whole time by resisting it. The anxiety itself was uncomfortable, sure, but the resistance to it, the war with it, that was the real suffering. From that moment on, my relationship with anxiety fundamentally changed. It still arises sometimes, probably always will. That's just how the nervous system works, but it doesn't have the same power anymore. When it comes, I notice it, I acknowledge it, and I let it be there. I don't make it mean something about me. I don't make it mean I'm broken or weak or doing something wrong. It's just energy moving through, a biological response, and it will pass like everything else. And you know what? It usually passes much quicker now because I'm not feeding it with resistance. I'm not adding fuel to the fire. This is what the monks discovered through their silence, and it's available to anyone who's willing to stop fighting long enough to see it. There's a teaching in Buddhism about the second arrow. The first arrow is the pain, the difficult experience, the anxiety itself. That's life. That happens. We can't always control the first arrow. But the second arrow is what we do to ourselves in response to the first arrow. It's the resistance, the judgment, the story, the why me, the this shouldn't be happening. And the second arrow, the one we shoot at ourselves, often causes far more suffering than the first. The monks learn to let the first arrow be the first arrow without adding the second. They learn to experience what's happening without creating additional layers of suffering through resistance and story. And that's the practice, if you want to call it that. Not to never feel anxiety, but to stop shooting the second arrow, to let your experience be what it is without making it worse. Now, I want to be clear about something. This isn't about achieving some permanent state of peace where you never feel anxiety again. That's not realistic, and it's actually just another form of resistance, another way of saying, I shouldn't feel this way. What we're pointing to is a fundamental shift in identity, a recognition that you are not your anxiety. You are not your thoughts. You are not your feelings. You are the awareness in which all of these things appear. And from that perspective, you can feel anxiety and be at peace simultaneously. They're not mutually exclusive. Peace isn't the absence of anxiety. Peace is the recognition that you are more than anxiety, bigger than anxiety, untouched by anxiety at the deepest level. The anxiety is like a weather pattern passing through the sky of your being. The sky doesn't fight the storm, and it doesn't need the storm to end to be itself. It simply allows everything to move through it. This realization has profound implications for how you live your life. When you're not consumed by the need to eliminate anxiety, when you're not spending enormous amounts of energy managing and controlling your inner experience, you become available for life in a way you weren't before. You can take risks because you're not terrified of the anxiety that might come with them. You can be vulnerable in relationships because you're not trying to protect yourself from uncomfortable feelings. You can pursue what truly matters to you because you're not being driven by the need to avoid anxiety. You become free, not because you've eliminated anxiety, but because you've stopped being controlled by it. You've seen through the illusion that you need it to be gone in order to be okay. The monks who spend their lives in silence aren't escaping from the world. They're discovering something about the nature of mind that applies everywhere, in every circumstance. They're discovering that suffering is optional, not in the sense that pain is optional, but in the sense that the resistance to pain, the war with what is, that's optional. And when you stop that war, when you stop fighting with your experience, a natural peace emerges, not because you've achieved something or attained something, but because you've stopped doing the thing that was preventing peace from being obvious. You've stopped arguing with reality. You've stopped insisting that this moment should be different than it is. Here's the thing that might blow your mind. Right now, in this very moment, regardless of what you're feeling, regardless of whether there's anxiety or peace or anything else, you are absolutely okay. Not conceptually, not in the future when things get better, but right now, the part of you that's aware, the consciousness that's reading these words, that's noticing your body, that's experiencing whatever is arising, that part has never been touched by any anxiety. It's been here your whole life, completely unchanged, completely at peace. The anxiety is something appearing to that awareness, but awareness itself is pristine, pure, totally untouched. And you are that awareness, not the personality, not the person with the history and the stories and the problems, but the awareness in which all of that appears. That's what the monks realize in their silence. That's the silent realization. And once you see it, truly see it, not as a concept but as direct experience, it changes everything. So what do you do with this? How do you take this understanding and make it practical? Start simple. The next time you feel anxiety rising, instead of immediately trying to fix it or make it go away, just pause, take a breath, and ask yourself, can I let this be here? Can I allow this feeling to exist without needing to change it right now? You're not giving up. You're not resigning yourself to suffering. You're simply experimenting with non-resistance. Just for a moment, see what happens when you stop fighting. Notice the space that opens up when you're not clenched against your experience. Notice that you can feel anxiety and breathe. You can feel anxiety and stand. You can feel anxiety and still be aware, still be present, still be fundamentally okay. That's the beginning. That's the crack where the light gets in. And then, as you go through your day, practice noticing awareness. It sounds too simple, but it's revolutionary. Just notice, I am aware right now. There is consciousness happening right now. Don't try to change what you're aware of, just notice the awareness itself. The more you do this, the more your identity starts to shift from being the content of experience to being the context, the awareness in which everything arises. And from that place, anxiety becomes manageable because it's not you. It's just something you're noticing, something passing through, no more significant than a bird flying across your field of vision. The monks have been practicing this for thousands of years, and they've discovered something that modern psychology is only beginning to understand. The resistance to uncomfortable feelings is what creates most of our psychological suffering. The feelings themselves, even intense ones like anxiety, are workable. They're just energy, just sensation, just biological processes. But when we resist them, when we make them wrong, when we build stories about what they mean and why they shouldn't be there, We create a whole secondary layer of suffering that's far worse than the original feeling. And the good news is, you can stop doing that. Right now. You don't have to wait until you're healed or fixed or different. You can simply choose in this moment to stop fighting with what is. To let your experience be your experience, without judgment, without resistance, without the need for it to be different. This is the silent realization. This is what dissolves anxiety at its root. Not by making anxiety go away, but by recognizing that the you that you truly are has never been troubled by anxiety in the first place. The waves on the surface can be turbulent, but the depths of the ocean are always still. You are the ocean, not the waves. And once you know that, really know that, not just intellectually but as lived experience, anxiety loses its power. It becomes just another wave arising and passing, no threat to who you truly are. The monks aren't special. They haven't achieved something you can't achieve. They've simply stopped long enough to notice what was always true. Beneath all the noise, beneath all the turbulence, there is a peace that passes understanding, a stillness that was never disturbed, an awareness that has been here all along, witnessing everything, untouched by anything. That awareness is you. That peace is your true nature, and it's available right now, in this moment, regardless of what you're feeling. You just have to stop fighting long enough to notice it.